What's up, guys? So got some crazy news. Apple has officially opened up iPad parts to be sold to the public. So if you're an Apple IRP member, or if you are just a customer looking to get an iPad part, you can purchase that through the self-service portal or through GSX if you're an IRP member. So the models that are currently available for parts, or at least the half parts that you can buy, are the ones listed here. It's the latest generation of iPads. The iPad 11, the Mini 7, the Pro series, and the Air series are all there. And then the last generation of the Air and Pro are also available. So pretty big, man. I can't believe we're actually getting iPad parts for these. Another big piece of the press release that came out from Apple was that they mentioned mobile Centrics in it. If we actually go look at the official press release, which was kind of vague and didn't really say very much, they mentioned in here about mobile Centrics being one of the partners that's going to be, already is a genuine parts purchaser and distributor on behalf of their genuine parts program. It's mobile Centrics in the US and Canada, and then it's mobileparts.shop in Europe. And that's a really big deal to me, because for so long, our third-party suppliers, which are really like our business partners, our biggest business partners as independent repair shops, they refused to acknowledge that they even exist. They didn't want to sell parts through these distributors. They wanted to sell parts directly to us. And unfortunately, that's not as beneficial to the repair shops, because we get parts faster through Mobile Centrics, Gadgets, and all of the other suppliers that are out there, because most of the time we're placing those parts with overnight orders, or we're right down the street from them and can just literally go pick it up. So that's a huge difference in terms of how the speed of service can happen for people that are purchasing these genuine parts through MS. And also just a complete 180 in how they view these distributors. So really happy to see that happened. So I think the biggest things to take away from this is that we can actually purchase these genuine iPad parts. We also now, as IRP participants and partners, we have access to iPad Diagnostic Tools on GSX, just like the Apple Store does. So previously, if you were an IRP member, you could create tickets and do diagnostic checks on MacBooks, iMacs, iPhones, but none of the other none of the other product lines. Now you can with iPads, which again, that's a pretty big deal, because iPads is a pretty big revenue stream for a lot of businesses in this space, as well as just customers love the iPad. It's the best-selling tablet in America. So this is a pretty big win to be able to use GSX Diagnostics. Also, we have service guides now. So we have, if you go to Apple's website, you can look up their service guides, and you can actually see the pictured service guides for the models on how to do screen replacements, charging port replacements, batteries, and they look great. They've definitely made some improvements on the quality of equipment that they're using to do these repair guides with, and they definitely have taken a lot more time to actually make them look very presentable and add more information that's going to be helpful for the technicians that are doing it. So this is a big deal to me, because this sets the standard for all future iPad models to have these guides. So we as repair shop owners don't have to create them ourselves like we have in the past. That's a really big thing that's going to actually help this industry succeed significantly. Also, we got this huge new part that can it's compatible with the display fixture tool that you probably were already using if you were an IRP member like we are. And that tool basically will heat up the iPad display and allow you to kind of get up underneath it in order to remove the display without breaking the glass. So we have guides and repair videos now. Again, if you have a GSX account, you can log in and see those publicly available guides on the back end, as well as ones that are not publicly available too. And as mentioned earlier, we can create tickets, but also we can see service history. And this is really big, because previously we couldn't see service history on iPads when they came in. But now we can actually see, did this go to another IRP member or Apple Store before it came to us? What was done to it? Is this a replacement device? There's a lot of valuable information that we get from the service history within Apple GSX. The parts that are specifically available currently are screens, digitizers, batteries, charging ports, cameras, and some other internal components on the self-service portal. I have confirmed on Mobile Centrics' website, as well as inside of our own GSX account, we can get speakers as well, and also power buttons. So that's pretty cool because it allows us to reserialize that Touch ID function for any of the iPads that have that. Definitely a big win for us as an industry. So the next thing you guys might be curious about is like serialization. Are these parts serialized? Are they required to be reserialized when you install them? And again, if you're purchasing this through the Genuine Parts program, it's handled a little bit differently than if you're an IRP member. So I'm going to speak on behalf of IRPs. What we have to reserialize is camera, digitizer, display, and true depth camera. Those are, from what I can gather from the internal documentation, the parts that are actually serialized because they require system configuration. System configuration is what we run on the back end of gsx2.apple.com, and we're able to actually access the information about the iPhone and recalibrate and reserialize the part numbers from our new part to the logic board of that iPhone to serialize it. So one thing that did come up, I'm going to probably ask Apple for comment on this, is do they plan on having a message pop up in future iOS updates? When they started serializing or announced that they serialized iPhone parts, we started getting message pop-ups on those. Again, not exactly sure if that's in the roadmap for iPads to have the same kind of service messages and, parts history that we do on iPhones and MacBooks, but again, will be interesting to see. As far as I can tell right now, and I haven't seen any confirmations that there are part messages that are popping up on iPads, and I haven't seen any updates that have that as part of the update. So right now seems to not be the case, but I could definitely see Apple doing this in the future. So something to look out for. So cost is the biggest thing that everyone wants to know about, right? Like, is it worth the cost? Is it going to actually be a viable program? Are the parts affordable enough for customers to actually choose and to have repair shops install for them? So to answer that question, on our website, as well as in the link of this video, I'm going to publish for you guys this spreadsheet that I have painstakingly gone through for the past many hours and went through and calculated every single part cost that's publicly available. I didn't put any in here that are not publicly available, but these are all the publicly available parts from the self-service platform. And you can see the device that they go to, organized by device, the part number. This is the part cost directly from Apple. One thing to note for those that are not familiar with how Apple Genuine Parts work, when we do a repair, we have the option to send back the old KBB or the known bad board, and we can actually get a return credit in return for sending them that part. It's a way for Apple to keep basically OEM parts from floating around in the refurbishing market, and by doing so, they give us a credit for it. So the battery is going to be a $28 credit when we send it back. The digitizer would be a $47 credit when we send it back. And I say all that to say this is the true price after repair. One thing to note too, you guys might be asking, does it have to be a genuine part when you send it back? We've been IRP members for years, and we've been sending lots of KBBs back, and I've never had an issue with sending back an aftermarket part and not getting my credit for it. Obviously, they want to get their parts back that was on the iPad originally, and so we abide by those rules and send them back to get this credit. But effectively, this is what the part cost is after that credit. All right. So the next column, what I did was I went through and actually calculated the retail price of these iPads. For the $349, this is the Wi-Fi model, and the $499 is the cellular model. Again, Apple bases their part cost. The part cost is not different for Wi-Fi and cellular, but when analyzing whether it's worth doing the repair, we want to actually calculate the difference in retail price between the Wi-Fi iPad models and the cellular, because cellular is typically $100 or more in difference and price difference. So again, this is the retail cost of a new iPad 11. This is the retail price of the iPad 11 with average 8% sales tax. Again, I'm doing kind of an average. I can't do every county in the United States. But on average, the average US consumer is paying 8% sales tax. It's different whether they buy it online and what county they're in and blah, 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 blah. But you get the point. For the purpose of analysis, 8% is a fair average. Then we have the repair costs. So a lot of repair shops run their pricing or their shops a lot different. But for the purpose of this, I thought it was important to take the part, add a 10% markup to justify the inventory of that product, the time in purchasing it, as well as your credit card fees that are typically associated with actually swiping and paying for that $100, $200, $300 part. That's what that markup's for. And then a small, very, very small profit for the repair shop. Then we add sales tax, which is 8% again, averaged on the total part cost. So again, if the part cost is $50, the part markup is $55, and then we calculate sales tax on $55, which is 8% of $55. Then we add a flat labor rate of $85. And I know, I can hear everybody screaming, yes, $85 is technically probably low for certain iPad repairs that are being done here. I know a lot of you guys listening probably charge quite a bit more in your labor rates, but effectively I wanted a reasonable average that was pretty competitive to do this analysis with. I get it. You guys probably charge a lot more. Don't beat me up in the comments over it. But the purpose of this was to at least get a fair average of people that will be doing these iPad repairs on a regular basis. And I don't think $85 is too unfair, especially when you consider a part markup. So that leads us to our final column, J, which is basically the repair viability. Basically, if there is the repair less than 50% of the cost of the retail price of that replacement when buying a new replacement device. If the answer is yes, that is considered a viable repair. If it's no, then that's considered a non-viable repair, meaning most customers on average when surveyed want their repair to be less than 50% of the cost. Obviously, $1,000 device replacement is more likely to have a little more wiggle room. It can maybe be more than 50%, but on average, that's kind of a good rule of thumb. So how many of these repairs ended up being viable? There were 86 repairs analyzed. 54 of them were viable, meaning that the repair cost using a genuine Apple iPad part with the service model of pricing that I've laid out here was actually viable, meaning 63% of all of the genuine parts that we can offer actually make sense to offer. Now, one caveat to that is that is in a single repair scenario, meaning the customer cracked the digitizer glass on an iPad 11 and they're only repairing the iPad 11 digitizer glass. If it ends up being the LCD in addition to the digitizer on the iPad 11, which is pretty common on that model, a part that's $150 for the digitizer and then a $250 part for the LCD is suddenly more in part cost than it costs to actually buy a new baseline Wi-Fi model. So there's caveats to here, right? It doesn't make sense to do multi-repair on almost any of these genuine parts, meaning if a customer wants to get a digitizer and a battery or a LCD and a rear camera, they're almost always going to be better off to use aftermarket and or OEM pool options from a website or supplier like Injure Gadgets, Wholesale Gadgets, Mobile Centrics, or fill in the blank. But using genuine parts whenever there's more than one repair part needed just doesn't make financial sense or economical sense. So that's that. The second point that I want to make is that certain repairs are much more economical than others. And one I want to highlight is the one that's most common. So this cover glass, gosh, I don't know why Apple named it that, guys. It's a digitizer. We all know it is a digitizer. So this cover glass for the iPad 11 is $151 just for the part. On Mobile Centrics, this exact part for the iPad 11 is going to be less than $50. So we can see here it's $45. That's a 250% increase in the part cost for one of the most common repairs that we do on a regular basis. Obviously, that is just not economically viable and kind of disappointing considering the iPad 11 will continue to be pretty much the most serviced iPad that the majority of us shops are going to see on a regular basis. Now, to contrast that with something that's extremely beneficial and cost competitive is the iPad Mini 7. So again, here we can see this is the cost of the repair. Once we send back that core or that KBB, that known bad board, known bad part. It's weird. I don't know why they say board when it's considered a part, but that's just their internal language, and I'm using it here. But we can see that this is actually cheaper than the premium option. So this is an example of where it's actually saving us $90 when doing this repair. Now, is it as cheap as the aftermarket? No, but we all know that the aftermarkets on these iPads are complete garbage compared to the premium options down here, which are typically like OEM copies or OEM pulls, which is pretty much the same thing you're going to get when it's genuine. So to have a genuine part actually be cheaper than these premium options is pretty awesome. And obviously that's probably going to bring down these premium prices pretty significantly and probably pretty fast. So what to take away from this? It's very advantageous for certain repairs. It's not so advantageous for others. If customers are getting more than one repair, they're better off using OEM pull parts in almost all cases. If the customer is wanting to get an iPad 11 screen repaired, they're better off using an OEM copy screen or aftermarket screen. If they're wanting to get an iPad mini screen done, they're definitely better off getting a genuine OEM. So, it's a great thing to go look at the spreadsheet and see for yourself how you're going to service and market these genuine parts if you plan on doing so. The link will be in the description for that. So another thing I wanted to talk about was the addition of the charging ports. I thought this was pretty big because having charging ports actually, as well as charging port service guides available for us to use is pretty big to me, because this would be the first Apple device that's a handheld device. I know we have them for certain MacBook models, the charging ports and whatnot, but this would be the first time we get it on a handheld smart device. Like, we don't currently have charging ports for iPhones. And now we have them for MacBooks, and even better, we have specific service guides for these USB-C charging ports, which to me is just massive. I mean, 5 years ago, I would have never thought that would be the case and that Apple would be doing that. So this is a huge win in my book, and I think it should definitely be celebrated by the industry. One thing that I do want to point out, I chuckled at this when I saw it. We can see the rip here and some of the adhesive from the original charging port that was laying here. And I want to take a second to talk about this, because to me, this right here is the biggest thing of this entire announcement. Why? Because Apple is so big on making everything perfect, right? Like, they market their devices as the latest, greatest, newest, best thing that's ever happened. And in reality, we all know that there's no product that's perfect. And as soon as an Apple device gets out of the box, it's going to get dinged up, scratched, broken, beat up, dropped on the ground, ran over by the kids' toys and four-wheeler and every other thing that possibly can happen to it. And again, it's not perfect. And I think Apple's really struggled with how do you market these repairability features. They know that they're popular, but they just don't really know how to market it, because their marketing team is so stuck in this mindset of like making these products look just unrealistically great, right? There's sci-fi and there's lights and all this, and it's like repair doesn't really fit into that model. But I'm here to say and scream to anybody at Apple that's listening to this, dude, market the heck out of this. Look at iFixit. They're a huge company that's got a massive fan base of people all over the world that literally love the idea that they tear stuff open, and it's messy when they do it. And Apple can totally and should 100% lean into the fact that they are now giving out parts for pretty much all Apple products that are the major Apple products that are out there. And when you see something like this, it shouldn't be something that they should be ashamed of. This right here is a sign that Apple is actually doing real repair, right? It's not perfect. It is messy. There's a little bit of adhesive left over when you do a repair, and that's okay. That's what it means to actually do repair. If it looks perfect when you do it, you probably weren't doing an actual repair that took any time and effort to do. Right? Simply just taking off the screen and putting on a new screen is not repair. That's a repair. But there's so many deeper options like these charging ports that have finally come to market. So again, it just made me chuckle seeing something that's not perfect in an Apple repair guide, and honestly makes me super happy, because I think it signals a pretty big cultural shift in the service team over at Apple, and how they're viewing these products, and as well as how they think these products should be serviced. And also that they're willing to let customers see a not so perfect side of Apple, which is okay and 100% should be embraced. Also, the glass only digitizers, never in a million years thought Apple would actually offer those. Even in my head, when I was playing out scenarios of when Apple finally comes into compliance with these right to repair laws, I was like, they're just going to make a new iPad that doesn't have digitizers anymore because they're not going to want to give out those parts. Like, digitizer replacements is a extremely modular component. It is literally just a piece of glass with, the touch functions built into it. That's crazy that we have that. And we actually have glass only digitizers for the iPad 11 now. They're expensive, but we have them. And I mean, that's a big win at the end of the day, even if it's not financially viable to do them. So some of the other things that I wanted to talk about that I thought was big, the second probably biggest portion of this is how this changes the Apple Care service program. So currently, Apple doesn't service iPad, or at least up until today, Apple didn't claim to service iPads. So, if you took your iPad into an Apple store or a Best Buy or another authorized service provider that was authorized by Apple, they're going to just say, hey, unfortunately, we don't fix these. You can pay us, I think it's like a $200 deductible on the base iPad 9 and 10 series, and they'll send it off and then send you back a brand new iPad. But they don't actually repair it. They just scrap the old one and then give you a new one. And obviously that's not environmentally friendly, nor is it feasible at scale, or really, quite frankly, the right thing to be doing. So, this begs the question of, well, what changes now? I can confirm that I went onto Apple's repair appointment page, and I was able to successfully book an appointment for an iPad 11 cracked screen replacement at a local Best Buy near me. So they have built in the functionality to create appointments for screen replacements, but it's yet to be determined if they're actually doing same day in-house iPad services at all of these authorized service centers. So I want to highlight two scenarios because, again, we're unsure if Apple chooses to do so. Let's go with the other one first. If Apple doesn't offer these services in their Apple store and in Best Buys across the country, this would be the first time that us independent repair providers, Apple IRP members, can do a service same day in-house for a customer that Apple customer can't get from Apple. Like, that's kind of crazy to think about. We can literally install, assuming you stock some of these parts, like we would probably stock the iPad mini 7 right now just because it's so affordable. A customer comes to us on iPad mini 7, we could do that same day in a few hours for that customer with a genuine part, serialize it through GSX, do everything that Apple is going to do. Apple would see that, and it would be the exact same service history in GSX that an actual Apple genius would see at the Genius Bar in an Apple store. So same exact service. Quite frankly, I would argue better because it's done by XiRepair. But nonetheless, same part, same service. If Apple doesn't offer that same service, they're going to run themselves into a situation where a customer comes into an XiRepair and asks to use Apple Care on their iPad, and we tell them, hey, we can do it. We have genuine parts in stock. This is how much it's going to be, but I can't take your Apple Care claim because Apple doesn't want to open up Apple Care and in-warranty repairs to independent repair partners, even though we're partnered with them. Yes, I know it makes no sense. And that customer is going to go to Best Buy, and assuming they don't do in-store repairs, they're going to say, hey man, we got to send off your iPad. You're going to lose all your data on it unless you have it backed up to the iCloud, which most customers don't. And they're going to create a very frustrated customer who's going, I just went to a local Apple repair shop, or repair provider that is certified and is partnered with Apple. I can see it on Apple's website. I can verify it myself. They showed me they can do it in-house same day. Why can't you guys? Why are their technicians capable of doing these iPad repairs, but the Best Buy, bless their heart, Geek Squad, the majority of those employees are not going to be able to? And that's not to knock Geek Squad. It's just Best Buy as a retailer. They're not set up to be a service house or a tech depot, or they're not meant to service and repair these devices. They're meant to sell you new ones. And so again, because of the complexity of these iPads, I honestly don't see them doing these same day in-house repairs. I can see them maybe sending them off to a depot and some centralized location in the US repairs them and maybe sends them back. But again, that just creates a frustrated customer. And so my hope in that being said, that my hope in that situation is that Apple recognizes the value in having us independents, because I've heard from Apple directly in panels that are published on my YouTube. You can go watch them. It's a fact that there are more independently owned and operated Apple service providers, independent repair providers in their network than they have in their authorized network, meaning there's more shops like XiRepair than there are shops like Best Buy and Apple stores. So it's pretty obvious to me that they should flip the switch. That's all they have to do is flip the switch and allow us to do in-warranty claims and Apple Care claims for iPads and by extension all the other devices. Overnight, they double, if not triple, their service network at no cost. The same payouts could be given to us that are currently given to the authorized people, and they don't lose anything. There's no additional cost to Apple. There's no additional necessarily frustrations either. And quite frankly, I might argue that it's actually a better scenario because, to my final point, we have the iPad technicians. We have been fixing these devices for the past 5 or 10 years in most repair shops in America. If you're an independent shop like XiRepair, we fix tens of thousands of iPads at XiRepair. Mail-in customers from all over the country have sent us iPad charging port soldering repairs, data recoveries, digitizer screen replacements. We stock them currently in store. You can come to my shop, give us 2 hours. We will give you an iPad back after with a brand new screen, brand new battery, whatever you need on it, same day service. Today, that's without genuine parts. And with genuine parts, now we can do it with genuine parts. So the labor pool is in the independent world. There's not a single Geek Squad employee or Apple genius that knows how to fix an iPad right now, and they're extremely complex. So I would argue, I think this is going to break down the current Apple Care model that we know it as today. And I think it's a really interesting opportunity for Apple to do the right thing and extend their hand out to say, hey, look, independent repair stores, we've shunned you guys for a long time, but we actually see the value in you guys being the extension of the Apple Store to customers and allowing customers to get their iPad repaired down the street rather than having to drive 2 hours to the nearest Apple Store or Best Buy. And also to have a technician that's already been servicing these devices and is an expert in iPad repair actually do the repair so it turns out successful. That's my hope. The second scenario here is that Apple actually plans on rolling out iPad repair at Best Buys and Apple stores across the country. And if they did, that would be an absolute nightmare. It would be a PR nightmare. It would be a repair experience nightmare and a quality control nightmare for customers, because these are by far the most advanced and complicated repairs to do because the screens are held down strictly by adhesive. It's extremely difficult to get the screens off without cracking it if you're trying to do a battery replacement. And if you crack that $300 panel when you're trying to do a $100 repair, not only are you leaving the customer without a device for quite some time, you're also leaving the customer with a really bitter attitude towards, why didn't you just let me go to my local independent repair shop? Because they're going to bring it to us anyways, and we're going to fix it. So I say all that to say, also, there's no training guides as far as I can tell online through GSX. There are these service guides, but there are no there's no certifications, at least that I can see so far. Maybe they're going to release some like we have for iPhones, meaning all the Apple authorized network and IRPs go through this like certification training guide for the devices that we're going to repair. We haven't seen iPad yet. So if they plan on rolling it out, we haven't seen anything yet, which leads me to believe the first option is probably more likely. They're going to probably tell customers they have to mail it to some depot who will actually do these repairs. And again, that's just not an efficient method. Apple would be much better off to take the route that ACO and SquareTrade has and trust independent repair providers to service their customers. That's how it's done in every other industry. Ford doesn't service every single customer it has. That's crazy. And even if they could, they have a huge tech base. Apple doesn't have a huge pool of technicians anywhere near as large as the independent world does. So they're much better off actually leaning on that and building a really healthy, strong ecosystem of independent shops that can help service the customers by extension. So again, point being, I think the iPad repairs is going to change. I hope that it's going to change kind of the way that Apple sees their ecosystem of in-warranty and Apple Care replacement services. One of the things I didn't like is the tool cost. Tool cost is super high. So the tools are $1,400 for those display fixtures. it, as much as I want to admit that it's great to have them, it is great to have these, but the average repair shop could not afford to do this. It doesn't make economical sense to buy the set of 2 of these display pockets for basically $1,500 each. It's $2,900 out the door. You know, the average repair shop, after they pay their, you know, overhead and labor to a technician, they're going to have to do 100+ repairs to be able to just recoup the cost on these 2 tools. You know, for a mom and pop, they're just not going to do that. And so Apple, if you're listening to this, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, man. Maybe subsidize the cost of the tools to ensure that parts are done to ensure repairs are done to your standard. But don't be mad when the majority of us repair shops end up not using these display pockets. I mean, that's $3,000. That's a lot of money. You know, $3,000 is what most of these shops are going to estimate they're going to put into, you know, housing these parts, these genuine parts, not into just 2 little tiny tools. So again, I hope someone can come by and maybe make a third-party tool that's compatible with the display fixture. I will say the one good thing that I will say about the tool is Apple, thank you for at least using the same exact display removal fixture tool that we already use for iPhones. So at least we don't have to buy a new one of these. But again, yeah, $1,900 for this is just freaking crazy. And then obviously the high cost of some of the parts is a little disappointing. So one of the last things I wanted to point out here was I noticed that when I was looking at the self-service portal, there was batteries for the Beats Pill, which, you know, is the little Beats by Dr. Dre speaker. And I had not seen this previously. I tried doing some Google searches to see if there was any other press releases about this, and there was nothing that I could find. Which leads me to believe that I guess this was part of the update and they just left this out of the press release. So I'm going to reach out to Apple to see if they have a comment on, you know, if there's other Apple devices like Apple TV or even the Beats headphones or AirPods, if they plan on releasing parts for those, or if there's more phases to this release, or if this was just a one-off thing. But it was also confusing too, because I looked up this part number in GSX and I wasn't able to find anything about this particular battery in GSX on my end as an IRP member. So do IRPs not have the ability to do Beats Pill repairs, but self-repair does? It's a little bit confusing, and I definitely hope Apple clears this up. But my hope is that they're actually going to start offering more than just these iPad repair parts, and pretty much any part that any product that they sell that's over $50 or $100, like the right to repair laws in California and other states require you to sell parts for. And I hope that's what they're getting at here. I hope they're going to start saying, well, you know, we don't necessarily want you to repair your Apple AirPods, but we recognize that we're required by law to sell the batteries for them, or to sell the individual AirPod if somebody loses one, or so on and so on. And I hope they open that up to the public, and including IRP members, to be able to get these spare parts. So again, I hope this wasn't a fluke. We'll figure out soon, and I'll get an answer for you guys on whether it is or not. So again, thank you guys for hanging. If you've stayed this long, I know this was a long video, but probably just a lot that was going on. I definitely wanted to share this with you. So my concluding thoughts. I think that it's pretty clear to me that Apple did this because of right to repair legislation. I don't think anyone would argue with that. I think, you know, I was a little concerned because January 1st of this year was the deadline to come into compliance. And I was a little worried because we had not heard anything up almost in 6 months about, hey, are we getting iPad parts? Are we going to get any of the other Apple TV or any of the other Apple products? Are those parts coming slowly but surely? Like, what's the deal? We were even having conversations at the Gadget Repair Expo that happened in Miami a few weeks ago about, hey, do we need to start the process of litigation against Apple for not being in compliance with these right to repair laws? And then lo and behold, a few weeks later, they completely reversed course, and now we have iPad parts, which is huge. So I think even though that's the reason they did it, was ultimately because of these right to repair laws, I think it's important to note 2 things. One, these companies are massive, and I see a lot of YouTubers and content creators and just people in my industry that just completely, you know, talk crap about Apple and these other big OEMs. And they lose sight of the reality that these OEMs, and Apple in particular, are $1 trillion massive companies with hundreds of thousands of people working in them. And not everyone has the same view. I have personally talked with great people in the Apple service team that want devices to be repairable, that see the need for them. And I would argue, based on the results that we're getting, that those people are actually winning internally. And I would encourage everyone here to not bash Apple as a company, but maybe acknowledge the failures that a particular segment of people in Apple have towards repair. You know, it's unfortunate there was a group of people in the past that said that iPads weren't serviceable. Unfortunately, luckily, those people are no longer winning, and legal is probably telling them that, you know, they have to publish these things even if they don't want to. Which leads me to my second point. Why are they doing it May 29th of 2025 and not January 1? Legal, if I had to guess, compliance, whatever internal department was probably telling them, hey guys, you know, you're not in compliance. We need this at least by second quarter of 2025 so that we can say, hey, you know, if we do get litigated, we can at least prove that we were in compliance the majority of the year. You know, if they were out of compliance June 1st, then technically the majority of the year they would have not been in compliance with these right to repair laws and thus subject to litigation. But because of the date that they chose to do it on, they were now the rest of the year, technically they will be in compliance for the majority of the year, meaning it will be difficult to do any litigation, which again is not necessary currently, I don't think. So that's the reasons why I think they're at now. Also, I think it's probably important to acknowledge that it probably took a lot of work to create those programs, you know, recording videos for every single one of the devices, setting up the relationships with the distributors and logging and inventorying parts that Apple themselves weren't servicing or offering before probably did take some internal tweaking to get set up, to say it lightly. And I'm sure there were massive amounts of internal debates over at Apple on whether this is even the right thing to do, or if they were going to pursue, you know, the legal route and roll the dice and see if anyone is willing to call their bluff and take them to court over it. And that again leads me to my last point, which is this: there is an alternate universe where Apple did not release iPad parts, and Apple said, "Hey, to hell with you guys. You know, we don't service these products. We don't think they're serviceable. We don't offer parts internally to our authorized network. So why would we sell parts to the public? We don't have parts to sell. There's nothing to sell. This is a consumable product." And that would have forced independents, as well as companies like iFixit and the Repair.org organization, to essentially pursue litigation against Apple and fight this out over a long, drawn-out battle for years in court. And to Apple's credit, that didn't happen. And if that had happened, it would have been a really, really ugly scenario to be in. And so my ultimate point here, for all of the problems that this program has, we have to acknowledge the win, which is that Apple's going in the right direction. It's very unfair to just simply hate the company because you don't like certain parts of the program. If you look at 2018 Apple to 2025 Apple, it's completely changed. We can use used parts and serialize them without GSX or being an IRP member. For God's sakes, we have access to iPhone, iPad, and MacBook repair parts. The latest iPhone 16s are some of the most repair-friendly devices that we've had. You can take off just the backlash and replace it without having to replace the entire back housing. I mean, we're getting win after win after win from a company that at one point was probably one of the most anti-repair friendly companies in the world. So they are reversing course slowly but surely. And I think they deserve kudos for that. So anyone that's listening to this from Apple, you know, cheers to you guys for doing the right thing. And I think history will look kindly upon the decisions that you guys made to release these parts and to not fight it. I definitely encourage you guys to obviously extend the product lines that you guys are offering parts for, and really push the bounds on how you guys view the relationship that you guys have with us independents. But with that being said, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you guys learned something from this. I hope you guys took some value from it. This was a big deal. This is a big day. So, you know, celebrate. And if you're in an independent repair shop and you haven't already joined the Apple IRP program, there's no cost to join. I would definitely consider doing it. It's free. There's no monetary cost to do it. You do need to be a legitimate business and have a legitimate commercial location to qualify. But I would definitely consider looking into it, especially now that you can get access to the through the parts, the genuine parts for these iPads. So thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you guys have a great day. Cheers.